that, then you find that there is nothing mysterious, nothing mystic, nothing fuzzy about the text, and it is in that sense a proper shastra. Now, what is a shastra? Let me give you a simple answer to the question, what is a shastra? Shastram iti shasanopayam. A shastra is an instrument of a discipline. Shasan. Shasan here does not mean administration, but a discipline. When you take admission to this institute, the first thing you should know is the parameters of work here, the discipline in which you are going to learn. So, a shastra is managing and creating through a particular art form or through a particular activity that we have chosen to do. So, if we want to know what is governance, and if we want to undertake governance and to do it correctly and for the benefit of the people at large, then we go to Artha Shastra. Because Artha means the whole tantra or the whole system of governance. Hence Artha Shastra. If you want to know what are the pleasures of life when you are young, and if you want to know what is erotic life, then you go to Kama Shastra. But again, within certain parameters, with an understanding, with a conscious effort. If you want to know what is performing arts, then you come to Natya Shastra. So, the classical period of India collected a lot of knowledge that existed in the earlier texts, collated them, and made different shastras. Manusmriti, Yagyavalk Smriti, these are shastras or dharma shastras for what is to be done in relation to other human beings. What is so-called duties of a person, individual duty, family duty, division of property, maintenance, how to behave, etc., etc. So, a shastra actually is always directed towards a particular purpose, because it is meant for a particular thing. It is to be applied. It is to be practically used and within a certain area. So if I want to know what is good poetry, and if I want to appreciate poetry, write poetry or kavya, and in the classical tradition, natak or dance or music is all interconnected, and hence I come to Natya Shastra. And as I'll go through all the 36 chapters in the next today and the next 4 days, you will see that this is also the primary text for literature. How to write a poem, etc., etc. It is very well described in 16th chapter and 32nd chapter and so forth. Different rules are given of diction are also given here. So we come to the Natya Shastra for a very comprehensive purpose. Now, the next thing, I define the word Shastra first. Out of the two words which conjoin to make Natya Shastra. Natya plus Shastra. So let us come to the other word, Natya. Natya is an exclusive word of Indian thought. It's not to be found in other literatures. This definition, all cultures produce some very beautiful definitions by which they either practice an art or a science or a certain social activity. So in India, we produced what was called the concept of natya. What is natya? Natya is the activity of nut. Who is a nut? Well, everybody has heard about Nataraj, which is Shiva. And I began with a prayer or with a vandana to Shiva and Parvati, so he's Nataraj. But then he is a Nataraj, or the king of nutters. And what is a nut? There is, of course, the very common use and the very ordinary use of the word nut, particularly in North Indian languages. Nut is rather pejorative. It is somebody who performs different kinds of tricks on the roadside, or rope trick, the Indian rope trick. There is a famous concept of the Indian rope trick in the West in the 19th century. So that is the nutter. But then the deeper meaning of the word natta is the performer. Now, this word performer or performance, is a very recent word. If you go and look the OED, Oxford English Dictionary, and look for a history of it, you will not find a very long history. And in the sense of performance, that is something to be seen, it's only about 50 years old, 50, 60 years old. And how did it begin? It began when people were influenced by the Natya Shastra and when they studied the Natya Shastra. So the very term which whenever you read something in English on drama and theater, and when you come across this word performance and performance studies, then you will find that this was brought into practice primarily by a New York professor called Richard Schechner. And Schechner had come to India and seen Ram Leela and seen the application of Natya, and then he wanted to develop a whole theory about what is performance. And he went back home and, like a good American academic, he made a whole theory about it, and he called it performance studies. Now, I'm not putting forth any theory. I'm just giving you a documentation of what happened from 1970s onwards. So performance is a very wide word. Dance is performance, music is performance, we now say performing arts, all kinds of things which you can see on the stage or on the screen, and now on the laptop or the computer screen, all that is now part of the performance. There are several terms used for it now, but primarily it is to be seen. And whatever is done by that particular person as performance, that person is called natta. So what does that person do? What does a performer do? Yes, he performs, but what is the purpose behind it? What is actually happening? He is doing some activity like gestures and singing and speaking and dancing in order to communicate a meaning. Of course, meaning is communicated by words also. But the natya does all this. A poet writes poetry, either recites it or now in the print culture prints it in a book or puts it on the net and it circulates and you read it. It's one medium, words. But the nut is speaking, the nut is doing gestures, the nut is dressed in a particular manner, the nut is making movements of different kinds. He is doing what is called acting or abhinaya. But what is this abhinaya? What is this abhinaya geared to? To communicate meaning. Right? Yasmat prayogam nayate tasmat abhinaya smritaha. What is this abhinaya? Abhinaya cannot be translated into English like acting. Because that's just part of abhinaya. Acting is only part of abhinaya. Speaking, dancing, making music, making signs through fingers, through hands, through eyes, which are very definite signs in a tradition, which have been developed over centuries and reformed and changed and embellished. It's language in itself. All that is the natakarma. And therefore, all this is natya. Right? Hence, natya shastra then becomes the shastra for a wide variety of genres. Not just for music, not just for painting, not just for sculpture, not just for theater, for all of them together. And if somebody were to ask you, that how is it that we, if you can bring it a little closer, huh? Yeah, because I want to. So if somebody puts a question and says, give me one or two characteristics common to all kinds of things which are called performance. If you want to know what is a performing art and what is perhaps not a performing art, then again the Natya Shastra gives us a definition, and it is there. Drishyam cha yat shravyam bhaved. Something which can be seen and something which can be heard. So when